Thanks for downloading a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online. Now stay tuned for your 3CR podcast.
And welcome to another episode of Lost in Science, and we're going to spend the next half an hour with you with a little bit of science. And we have some special guests today. Actually, one guest is Associate Professor Joel Pearson, who Stu's actually talked to. He has been doing a little bit of research on hallucinations and inducing hallucinations. Have you heard about this story?
Yeah,
Chris?
it's something to do with being able to induce a hallucination in normal, healthy brain and then see what the pattern it forms in the brain and see how hallucinations work inside the brain. So it's all about that kind of thing.
Yeah, which will be quite interesting to see how they map that in the brain. And I am actually going to be talking a little bit, not about hallucinations, but an animal that I wish was a hallucination. It is the suckiest of all animals, and I'm just going to leave it at that. I went away on holidays a couple of weeks ago. I encountered this animal.
I love all
Is suckiest
animals.
a clue? Is suckiest a clue?
Suckiest is a clue. I'll just leave it at that.
I love everything.
I'm thinking it's a remora or a lamprey or something.
Okay, maybe
yeah.
I don't love
No,
everything.
You guys can have a guess, but yeah, they are animals that should be just figments of our imagination for all I'm concerned.
Okay, well, surprise us later, Claire.
Leeches.
Ooh, you'll have to stay tuned. On with the show.
People might know what the word hallucination means and probably have some idea of what they think a hallucination is, but some recent work on inducing hallucinations has been carried out at the School of Psychology at the University of New South Wales, and I've got Associate Professor Joel Pearson on the line with me to talk about what they were looking for and how they went about identifying hallucinations in people. Thanks for joining us on Lost in Science, Joel.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
So hallucinations, I guess people probably have some sort of idea that, you know, if a person takes drugs, they might experience hallucinations, and there's certain illnesses like, for example, Parkinson's disease, where patients experience hallucinations. What do we mean when we say a hallucination? What is someone experiencing?
So that's a great question. It's one that's really fired up in the last week since this paper was published. So I've been getting a flood of emails, discussions online, Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube about this exact question. What is hallucination? If we imagine something, mental imagery, is that a hallucination? The huge range of visual illusions that we know about, are they hallucinations? So there's all kinds of visual illusions where you can see something that's not actually there. So should we call that a hallucination? And some people will say that no, hallucination purely needs to be a conscious, let's say, visual or sensory experience when there's no incoming information, so in sensory deprivation or when you're asleep, eyes closed, that kind of situation. Where we came down with this study, we defined the things you see induced by flickering light as a hallucination because we can't predict what you see when you flicker light at people. First, you might see, so if I just flicker a TV monitor or a computer monitor, just black and white, flickering that quite fast. First, you might see stripes, then some blobs, then some dots, then a windmill spinning pattern, some colors, and it just keeps on changing unpredictably. So that's very different to some of the illusions where every time I show you this thing, you'll see the color red, for example. I know pretty much 99% of the time you're going to see red. So that's very predictable. These flickering stimuli, this flickering stuff, it's a lot harder to predict. So that's kind of where we start off with the definition of hallucinations, and there's sort of a long history of calling flicker-induced experiences hallucinations dating back a couple hundred years, in fact.
So this is kind of a standard sort of understanding of it within psychology as well.
It's pretty standard, but when you look into it, and some of the discussions I've had in the last week really highlighted the fact that, we don't really have a good, clear definition or framework for what we want to call a hallucination.
That must make it very difficult to study then.
It does, right? So that's why that's one of the, and also very interesting, I think. That's one of the areas, the reasons I wanted to get into this area, because if you want to be able to study hallucinations in the lab and not have to just rely on clinical populations, then you need a very clear definition so you can induce it in the lab. The same way that if researchers want to study cancer in humans and maybe they want to use an animal model, they need a definition of what cancer is. If cancer is only cancer if it's in a human, then they can't do their research on animals. But if you have a broader definition of what cancer is, then you can study the mechanisms in different ways, not always in humans. So the same sort of analogy applies to us. So if we're happy calling this flickering light stuff a hallucination, that means we can study it anytime we want in the lab with any subjects. I can study it just on myself, for example. I don't have to go to a clinical population in a neurology clinic and study it there.
And I guess to remove the subjectivity of someone just kind of describing what they're seeing or what they're hallucinating is, if you can remove that subjective interpretation and figure out a way of measuring it objectively, then you can compare different people in different situations over time.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the more exciting things I think about the study. So as I said, people have known that if you flick a light, you'll hallucinate, you'll see stuff that's not there. We've known that for hundreds of years. But the problem, as you said, is it's very subjective. How can we study these experiences if we have to rely on people drawing them, if we have to rely on people verbally describing just with words? When you have those kinds of measures scientifically, it's very hard to look at the brain mechanisms, to do modeling, neural modeling, figure out what's going on. You can't really quantify it, or it's very, very difficult to quantify drawings or words in the way we like to do in science. So what we did in this study is, rather than just flickering lights or a full monitor, we reduced the flickering stimulus down to a ring. Very simple, a donut stimulus. And it's literally a white ring on a black background that flashes on.
I can actually put up a video of this on our web page that people can look up later on if they want to. Probably best if they're not epileptic or suffer from migraines, apparently. Exactly true.
There's a warning on there. Yeah, in the first 4 days of the study coming out, I think the video I put on YouTube got sort of 500,000 views. So people are sort of having fun playing around with it. So let me continue. So what happens when we reduce the type of flickering stimulus down to this ring, this donut stimulus, is that instead of seeing all these random different things, colors and spirals and windmills and dots and stripes, now people just see blobs.
Okay. Everyone sees the same hallucination?
Pretty much, yeah. Okay. Some people see it stronger than others, but they just see blobs. They don't see the colors, they don't see the stripes, the windmills, all the other stuff. So all of a sudden, okay, if everyone's seeing blobs, that means we can start using different tools to measure this thing. We don't have to rely on drawings and verbal descriptions because we're actually making it a bit more predictable.
You're listening to Lost in Science and Stu's interview of Associate Professor Joel Pearson and his study of hallucinations.
So from that point, you went further and tried to figure out where was the hallucination arising? Is that?
Yep.
That was an extension of the...
This is where the science will get a little bit more complicated. But we did a bunch of different things. The first thing we did was we wanted a way to measure the strength of the hallucination. So we had the hallucination ring flickering, and then inside we put a perceptual ring where we actually had blobs on the screen that were actually there. And this allowed people to just compare the two. All they have to do is say, in which ring, the small or the large, am I seeing stronger blobs? Okay, and then on different experimental trials, we change the strength of those perceptual blobs, the real ones that are there, and this lets us, with enough data, measure the point at which people are equally likely to say the real blobs are about the same as the hallucinated blobs.
They've got...
Yeah?
You've got an objective measure of the hallucination then?
Yeah, pretty much, yeah. So it's a what we call a two alternative force choice comparison. So people have to compare the two rings. They have to say which one's stronger. So now they're comparing basically blobs to blobs, and so we have a way to measure that strength. And this is sort of a standard measure in psychology and cognitive neuroscience. So then we did a whole bunch of other experiments. The second thing we did was something similar, but we developed a way to measure the speed, because I didn't mention this before. But the blobs actually start moving. Once you see them for a moment or two, they start moving around the ring. And we were interested to see this, measure the speed of that, so we developed a technique to measure the speed. Then we also wanted to figure out, get some insight into where in the brain, or maybe the eyes, these hallucinations were occurring.
So I guess you didn't know whether it was something within the eye itself, or whether it was in the processing part of the brain, or where it was actually happening that this hallucination was appearing from.
Exactly, yeah.
Right.
So because no one had been able to develop these tools to measure it, it was too difficult to ask these questions before.
Okay. So so you set up an experiment to figure this out. How did you go about that, and what did you find?
Yeah, so we utilized a thing we know about the brain, a trick about the brain, that the information that goes into each eye is not combined until it's in the brain. And we know it's not combined until certain levels of brain processing, so in the cortex, the visual cortex. So before that, the information is kept pretty separate. So what we did, we showed people two little rings and presented one ring to one eye and the other ring to the other eye. And then we can flicker those in sync, so in synchrony, flickering them together, or out of sync, flickering one then the other.
Yep.
I hope everyone's following me here.
So you're getting a different flicker in each eye at different times.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we flicker this quite slowly, where the hallucination is much weaker. And here's the logic. If the information is being combined, and we know it only is combined in the brain, then we're actually doubling that flicker frequency. The neurons in the brain are going to receive flicker at double the rate, because they're going to get information from both eyes, and because in one condition they're out of synchrony, they're going to get, let's say if we stimulate at 5 hertz, those neurons are going to get stimulation at 10 hertz, or around about that. So here's the logic. If these things are being processed in the brain, in the visual cortex, then people should experience stronger hallucinations in the out of synchrony condition compared to the synchronous condition. And that's exactly what we found.
What does that mean? That means so the eyes are picking up the flickering, and the brain is combining the information from each eye into one single number of flickers. Is that?
Pretty much. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So it means that the hallucination, what people are experiencing, is being largely produced in the brain itself, in the visual cortex, and not. There's a couple of other areas before the cortex that were also candidates, but we can largely rule those out now.
So it's not an optical illusion arising from the way our eye sees the world. It's a processing feature of our brains that cause this hallucination.
Exactly, yeah. So even though a few newspapers and websites have called this optical illusion, what the data suggests is it's really a brain illusion, if you like. It's happening in the brain, not the eyes.
So I guess people might be asking, what can you use this information to do? How does it help us as humans negotiate the world? What purpose is there to knowing how these hallucinations work? Well,
there's quite a few. One, in terms of fundamental basic science, is to understand how the brain creates consciousness. So a lot of people have called that mystery of consciousness, how we experience the world around us from moment to moment, and that creates this feeling of who we are and ourselves. How does the brain do that? We just don't know. So using tools like this, where we can induce conscious experiences completely from inside the brain, we can use that as a tool to study consciousness. So
okay.
That's one thing we can do in the lab. But potentially more exciting for applications is this idea that maybe we can use this as a model, as a lab-based model, to study hallucinations or pathological hallucinations that occur in the real world. So sort of naturally occurring symptoms, like you mentioned at the beginning, Parkinson's. So Parkinson's patients often get visual hallucinations. It's very hard to study because we don't know when they're going to have the hallucination, so we can't always have them in the lab ready to study when they're having a hallucination. So if we can use this flicker hallucinations to study the mechanisms and the brain mechanisms of hallucinations in general in our lab, we can do that anytime we want, and then apply those findings to the clinic to help develop new treatments.
So it has got real-world practical applications that will help people, I guess, if not cure the disease, then at least reduce the symptoms of things like Parkinson's and other mental health issues.
Yeah, exactly. I think it does. It's early days yet. It's still, in the fundamental science phase, but next we move into the translation stage and then the actual neurological and clinical work.
Well, it's really interesting work that you're doing, Joel, and I'd like to thank you for joining us on Lost in Science, and we'll have to catch up in the future and check in on how your work's progressing.
Sounds great, Stu. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
All right, let me start with a story. I just returned from a holiday to Lamington National Park, which is in South Queensland, and unfortunately is not, as the name would suggest, covered in desiccated coconut.
But that's where the Lamington comes from. It's like it grows on the trees there. It's like the original Lamington
like
fruit.
A fruit.
Yeah.
No, unfortunately it isn't. It's named after Lord Lamington, who went there once, and the only thing he did when he was there was shoot a koala. Thanks very much, Lord Lamington.
I prefer to call him Lord Lamington.
Yeah, me too, Chris. Totally. So Lamington National Park, it's actually a spectacular subtropical rainforest. It's got Antarctic beech, more than 100 species of fern. It's got brush box trees that are like 1,500 years old. And it was also where David Attenborough first recorded the lyrebirds back in 1970. Ooh. I know. And there are also more waterfalls than you can poke a stick at. And there are many sticks. So it's a total paradise for hikers and nature enthusiasts. So off we set into paradise for a 3-day walk. Unfortunately for us, about 10 minutes into our walk, the rain clouds rolled in and our paradise turned into hell.
Be a little dramatic there, Claire.
All right, let me just tell you why. It wasn't because of the rain or the mud or the cold. They were all very manageable things. But just after the first drops of rain hit the ground, we started noticing things moving all over our shoes. And on closer inspection, it was in fact an army of leeches.
I was right.
Descending upon us, making their way up our legs to suck our blood.
So more ascending upon you than descending upon you.
Well, descending first because I think they might have been dropping from the trees or like...
Yuck.
I don't know. We ended up...
It's raining leeches.
It totally was. Like they were on
how many
arms,
leeches roughly
they were
talking
on
here?
our faces. So about 50 on each foot. 50 leeches on each foot. And I'm pretty good when it comes to like spiders, snakes. I'm fine with all manner of insects. But there's just something about the leech that really makes me want to scream and vomit at the same time, which sounds dangerous.
I just pictured it.
And
That's like from like The Exorcist, the kind of...
Yeah. And each time I brush them off, so 50 on each foot, each time I brush them off, about 10 minutes later, I looked down and they were there again. It was really overwhelming. So this went on all day as we walked, and it gave me a lot of time to think about the leeches. Also ask a lot of questions. Where did they come from? What were they doing before it rained? Where did they disappear to after the rain stopped? How did they know we were walking past? And if we weren't there, what else would they eat?
So these are the things going through your mind as your brain slowly loses blood supply.
Yes. So now that I'm back in the real world, I wanted to share my leeching knowledge with you.
Right.
Because as you know, as they say, a problem shared is a problem halved and all that sort of stuff. So, guys, thanks for being my support
you
group for
brought in
today.
a leech for each of us. Oh, that's so lovely of you, Claire. Yeah.
I did not,
Thanks.
listeners, I did not bring a leech into the studio. I wouldn't do that. And here's why. So the first thing I want to make clear about leeches is that they can vary quite a lot in size. There's around 500 species worldwide, and they can vary between 7 millimeters long to, wait for it, 300 millimeters long.
That's like
Stretched
a foot.
out.
That's a foot leech.
That's a foot leech.
300 millimeters. That is huge.
It is the stuff of nightmares, everyone. Luckily, the leeches I was contending with on my walk were more along the lines of around 20 mil. So about 2 centimetres.
Okay.
Yeah. Also, you should know that this isn't just a South Queensland issue. Leeches can be found almost anywhere in Australia where there are damp areas and watercourses. So unless you are in a permanently arid area, you are at risk of leech. And don't think you're safe in the ocean either. There are marine leeches.
Sea leeches.
gross.
Yeah. To be fair, these guys, the sea leeches, feed on the blood of fishes and not humans. But still, they're there.
Yeah.
Yep. Now, one of the biggest questions I had was around what happens in the dry weather. Where do they go? What happens to them? Do they dry out? Well, the answer is yes, they kind of do. In dry weather, some species burrow in the soil. And in the soil, they can survive for many, many months, even when there's a total lack of water. And their normally squirmy, leechy bodies dry out.
Squirmy. Make it better, thanks.
So their squirmy, leechy bodies dry out. They become contracted and rigid, and you can't even see their suckers anymore. So they pretty much just turn into these blackish brown sticks, and they can last like that for ages. And then all it takes is about 10 minutes of sprinkling rain with a few drops of water, and the leeches go from full torpor to activated and ready to attack. Terrifying.
And so what then? They just look for prey? Is that how it works?
Yeah, exactly. So that was my next question. How do they know there is prey around? Well, they're very responsive to both light and changes in light and also mechanical stimuli.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of it's sort of this trial and error approach. So the leeches, I don't know if you've ever seen them, they sort of like one part of them sticks on a leaf or something and then they just wave around in the air, just sort of like a flagpole. And they just sort of change position frequently, sort of exploring using their heads and waving their body and assuming this sort of alert posture, extending themselves their full length. So if there's any sort of changes in mechanical stimuli around them, then they know where to go. So they're ready for anything, really.
Oh.
I can picturing a science fiction film now with like this all these leeches sticking up and you've got to sneak through quietly so they can't know you're there. And then we're going waving around.
There's got to be one, isn't there? Like
Yeah,
the
I think
leeches,
it
like
feels-
the blob
it feels
or something.
familiar, yeah.
It does. Oh.
Or like just in your bed or something like that. Oh.
That's right. They sound like Triffids a little bit.
Did you just made them sound
You
like
just-
Triffids
yeah.
a little bit? Yeah.
Yeah. But I say Triffids do that.
And as you know, leeches feed on blood, which means they are sanguivorous. Great word, huh? Sanguivorous. That means they feed on blood.
Or
Great.
sangria.
Ooh.
But they do have preferences for whose blood they drink. So there are leeches that are specific for mammals, fish, frogs, turtles, or birds. There's even a leech that preys on other leeches. So I don't know if they suck other leeches' blood or they suck the blood that other leeches have sucked.
Like secondhand blood.
Secondhand blood. I think it might be secondhand blood. I know, so cruel.
I wonder what's worse, a mosquito or a leech?
Leech.
Is it true that leeches enjoy the taste of disgust and so they go for people who are more disgusted by them?
I haven't found that in my research, but
Okay,
you know, that's probably
Valid
an experiment.
Yeah,
that
the disgust
maybe,
hormone.
Maybe you or anyone but me could perform. I don't want anything to
I
do
think
with
we're
that.
going to need you for
actually.
this one, Claire, for obvious reasons.
They can also ingest several times their own weight at one meal, and
Yuck.
once they finish feeding, the leech drops off and returns to a dark spot to digest its meal, and the digestion can take months.
So it's not the same leech when you come through again.
No, it's a completely different leech. And they only need one blood feed to last them a year.
Oh, well.
Yeah. So that sort of answers my question about how they survive when we're not around.
Exactly,
you
yeah,
know?
because I was wondering that.
Yeah. Yep. So now it wouldn't be a leech story unless we mention the medicinal value of leeches over the ages. You know, back hundreds of years ago, leeches were employed to remove so-called bad blood from patients. But even today, they are used clinically after microsurgery and can assist in the reattachment of fingers and toes.
Oh, gross.
And skin grafts, because one thing leeches do really well is get the blood flowing and keep it flowing. So they're apparently of great value to plastic surgeons.
Oh.
They are, although, of zero value to me. I'm still suffering from residual leech bites. Which,
Are they itchy?
yeah. So I pull them off and they leave this leech hickey on my leg and there's blood pouring down my leg. Finally, once the blood stops, it's extremely itchy for weeks afterwards. Okay. So as far as I'm concerned, these animals truly suck.
So clearly that was your punchline. But I just want to know. Yeah, okay, the mic has been dropped. I want to know, so you can just pull them off? There's no magic trick that they have to they don't leave a bit behind. You have to put salt on them or something like that.
Yeah, I think
or
it's salt or fire.
Is there some sort of, you just pull them off?
Apparently, if you put salt on them, they spew everything back into you or something. I don't know.
Yuck! I wouldn't want that regurgitated out. I think if you put salt on them, they release of their own accord, so you don't get as big of a hickey, or it doesn't make.
But that kills them. Salt kills them. It dries them out. Yeah,
but they release.
Yeah.
So you're not pulling them off. You're not yanking them off.
You can use your fingernail as well. Just scrape
gross.
them across.
I just sort of.
But the whole
them up into
as soon as you start scraping them, they go into a little ball, and then you try and flick them, but then they get stuck on your other fingers. It's completely messed up. All right, okay. I think we'd stop. We should stop.
We've bled this dry.
That's all we've got time for on this episode of Lost in Science. Thanks for tuning in and joining us. Lost in Science is recorded at the studios of 3CR in Melbourne and broadcast across Australia on the Community Radio Network with the financial assistance of the Community Broadcasting Foundation. If you want to talk back to us, you can get in touch. We have a Gmail account, lostinsight@gmail. You can also find us on Twitter and on the Facebook. And if that's not enough Lost in Science for you, you can always tune in again next week, where the team will once again get lost in science!
Thanks for listening to a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online.